Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rosa Celorio, and I'm actually Associate Dean for International Comparative Legal Studies at GW Law School. And I wanted to tell you that this lecture that we're going to hear today from the wonderful Allison Anthony is actually part of our Visiting Scholar Speaker Series, and the idea is to showcase the amazing research that's being conducted by many of our visiting scholars at this institution. Some of them are here with us today as well. And I just wanted to tell you that our Visiting Scholar program is part of our International Comparative Legal Studies program. And we basically have visiting scholars that join us from around the world. And I have to say, they really enrich intellectual and scholarly life of the law school and our academic communities. I'm very grateful, that we have the scholars that we have in this program. And I have to say, we have a very special visiting scholar that's going to be presenting today. She's Allison Anthony, and the title of her talk is HUBZones as a Means of Preference in Government Contracts, a Comparative Perspective. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the many achievements that Dr. Anthony has. She's a senior lecturer in public procurement law at the University of South Africa and a deputy director of the African Procurement Law Unit at Stellenbosch University. And she's also an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa. She specializes in construction procurement law, general public procurement law, and administrative law. She also published the first book on construction procurement law in 2021, as well as numerous journal articles and book chapters on these topics. She has also trained public officials in South Africa on public procurement matters and teaches the infrastructure procurement law course in the LLM and postgraduate diploma in public procurement regulation and policy based at Stellenbosch University. And I just wanted to tell you on a personal note, at the International Comparative Legal Studies course, we have actually gotten to know Allison very well, throughout her time here. And I have to say, Allison is passionate, she's dedicated, she's hardworking, she's an absolutely brilliant scholar. She loves what she does, which is so refreshing to see in a scholar. I have to say, her intellectual curiosity is just boundless, right? And she's also a joy to work with. And I want to say also that when you're organizing a panel at the law school, you want Allison to attend. You want Dr. Anthony to attend, because usually you have like a question and answer session, right? And you want like a really strong, thought-provoking question that all the panelists are like, ooh, what am I going to do with this question now? I have to answer it well. Dr. Anthony will ask that question. She always does, right? So she's also a wonderful participant in a lot of the events that we have in the law school. Thank you again for agreeing to present your work today, and the floor is yours. We will have also a question and answer period after her talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone will be able to understand my accent. There's a meme going around that says, I'm not angry, it's just my South African accent. Thank you very much, Dean Celorio, for the very kind introduction. I'll probably walk around a little bit. I'm not a podium person, so I'll do what is comfortable. And I would like our discussion today to be a little bit more of that, a discussion rather than a presentation as such. That's how I like to engage the people that I'm talking with. So there was a lot of public procurement words that Dean Celorio was mentioning, and what she actually meant when she said is, Dr. Anthony likes to ask questions, is rent a crowd. If you ever want somebody at your event, rent a crowd. All right, HUBZones. This was the very first topic that I researched when I arrived in the US in January this year. And as was announced, the topic is HUBZones as a means of preference in government contracting, a comparative perspective. So we'll look at what my research question is in this research paper, and it will become apparent by itself. It will unfold by itself as I go through my presentation today. So the job of a visiting scholar is not just research, but also culture exchange. And that has been a very rich experience for me this year. So I will share a little bit about my own culture and the South African culture, which I infuse into this research a little bit. But first, to understand this specific topic, you will need, can everybody hear me? Okay. So to understand this topic that I decided to research, you need to understand a little bit more about South Africa and about preferencing in South Africa. All right, now what is public procurement for those of us that are not part of public procurement? It's basically government contracting. It's when the government identifies that it needs goods, services, infrastructure, anything that you can think of. You think of a procuring agency, any government department, they need chairs, they need tables, they need computers. So the contract that they sign with a private company is to provide that, those goods, the services, infrastructure, building of a hospital, etc., absolutely anything and everything you can think of. And that whole process and the law that regulates that process is public procurement law. It can also be called, or it is also called general, government contracting or government procurement. So I'll use all those terms interchangeably so that everyone knows what I'm talking about. So when it comes to South Africa, there are specific things that we need to discuss in order for you to understand the background. Welcome, come inside. So first we'll look at the statistics, the geography, and then some cultural background. All the pictures here that you'll see today are South African pictures, either ones that are on the internet or ones that I took myself. All right. So a little bit about South Africa. The little map over there shows you exactly where in Africa we're located. We have 60.6 million people. That's the population of South Africa. The average life expectancy is 62.8, around about 63 years. It's actually quite young. The economy is built on finance, real estate, manufacturing, wholesale, and retail trade. We have 11 official languages. People are always shocked to hear this. We really have 11 official languages, and no, I don't speak all of them. Only 2 and a couple of words of a third. So unfortunately, almost a quarter of the population live on social grants. And 11.7% live in informal settlements. So informal settlements is basically what we call either informal settlements or townships, which would generally be your slums or ghettos as they're called in our countries, just so that you know what I'm talking about. Right, so that's a map, a little bit of geography of South Africa. I'm not sure if you can see right at the bottom is a little town called Mossel Bay, that's where I'm from. I was born between Uppington and Kimberley on the little orange area, top left. My parents then moved to Mossel Bay where I grew up and went to school. I then moved to Cape Town and went to Stellenbosch University. And then I moved all the way back up to Gauteng in Pretoria where I currently live, where I work at the University of South Africa. In Cape Town, interestingly, I worked at the University of the Western Cape. So I went from University of the Province to University of the County. So we have 9 provinces, and an interesting fact as well is that we have a country within a country. Lesotho over there, the little green spot, is a country on its own. So we have Lesotho is a country within another one. On the right-hand corner there is our national flower called the King Protea. So below left is in Cape Town, that's our parliament. So we have 3 capitals, imagine that. Cape Town is the legislative capital, where our laws are made, that's Parliament. Top right-hand corner, that's Bloemfontein, that's our judicial capital, that's our Supreme Court of Appeal. Not the highest court in the land, but that's where our Supreme Court is. Top right-hand corner is Pretoria, where I live. And I chose that picture specifically because now in the first 2 weeks in October, we have little purple trees all over the city called jacarandas. They're actually not indigenous to South Africa, but to Argentina and Brazil, and came to South Africa in about 1880. So Pretoria is the executive or the administrative capital. That's where our union buildings are. It's the head of our executive. I did not include that because it was an ugly building and nobody needs to see that. underneath here is the people of South Africa. And you understand why I showed this picture, to show that this is how diverse the country is and to illustrate how arbitrary race classifications can be. And see, we have white people in South Africa. People are always surprised when white people travel. Well, can't be. Yes, we have white people in South Africa. This is a building I am proud of, however. This is our constitutional court, and it's not in one of the three capitals. It's in Johannesburg. So the top left-hand corner is what the court looks like on the inside. We have 11 constitutional court judges, and everything in the court and in the entire building is one. So most people know South Africa for its political history, apartheid mostly, and all the difficulties that went along with that. Apartheid was abolished in 1994, and that's also when our interim constitution came into operation. 1997 is when our final constitution came into operation, and the importance of that I will reveal later on. So you'll see that the benches on the front are a little higher than the judges. And that was done purposely, so that the people arguing in front of the judges are physically a little higher than the judges. You'll see at the back, there's a little strip around at the back of the brick wall, and that is where the judges can see people walking by. It's at eye level, so that they can see who the people are that they're making the judgments for, and that everybody's feet look the same. So this is significant in South Africa because of our apartheid history, and so that the constitutional court judges realize that we have this new building and we're including it with our new constitutional values of equality, freedom, equity, etc. On the right-hand side, it says there, the first constitutional court of South Africa, established under the Constitution, was opened by the President Nelson Mandela. It's the Supreme Court of the land, and their justice be administered in this court without fear, favor, or prejudice. The bottom left is the court from the outside, and you'll see on the buildings the different colors. That is constitutional court written in the horizontal, each in a different color to represent the different people of South Africa. You saw what the different people look like on the previous slide. The little scruffy building on the side there is not just because the court was placed. That is actually the prison where apartheid prisoners were held. One of them. And it's significant because some of those buildings were torn down and the bricks were used to build the Constitution. And that's why that is significant, to remind us of our past and the significance of our constitutional court. All right. Right at the top is my university, University of South Africa, where I currently teach. And at the bottom is the University of Stellenbosch, where I'm affiliated as well. The 100 is because last year the law faculty turned 100 years old, and the 3 pillars in front is also a in remembrance of our constitutional values as well. And it's a commitment to teach students in light of our Constitution. All right. Now onto the cultural side of things. So that's a beach, lovely beach in one of our provinces where we move from. We have about 80% black or African people, almost 10% white, 2.6% Indian, and about 89% colored people. Now the word colored is very derogatory here in the States, I know, but it is a very accepted term in South Africa. So in apartheid times, we were divided into white, black, and colored. And, okay, you won't be able to see that, that's fine. The reason why the race classification was so arbitrary is because in South Africa, you saw on the picture, people look so different. Is that a colored person could be classified as white, and a white person classified as black. And it's just so arbitrary because all you're doing is judging a person on what they look like, rather than what they identify as. So naturally, those classifications we no longer have in South Africa, but we have the statistics
in all government forms for statistical purposes and also for affirmative action purposes. Because the result of apartheid was that black people were now economically, socially, geographically, in every way disadvantaged as compared to white people. So what I do for my students is, in 1994, with the abolishment of apartheid, white people were here, socially, economically, in every way, as black people over here. And affirmative action was meant to do this. And once everyone is equal, we will do away with the affirmative action law. Now I know that it's still referred to as affirmative action in the States and in other countries, but in South Africa we no longer refer to it as affirmative action. It's actually called black economic empowerment. Because that is essentially what it is, the empowerment of black people. And interestingly, black people are now colored, black, African, and Indian people. So the number 1, 3, and 4 are now categorized as black. South Africa, and then white. So you can imagine, based on our numbers and statistics, how disadvantaged the country was in 1994, with 80% of people living in poverty. And only 10% were the other, well, actually 90%, because 80% is black, and the other 10% is made up of so-called colored and Indian people, and 10 white. So 90% of our country did not have opportunities in 1994. So that is quite a dramatic thing to have to correct. And that is why we have black economic empowerment. And we'll see why it comes into environment. Now, what exactly are HUBZones and how does this connect to my topic? Now, HUBZones are a means of preferencing certain geographical areas based on the need for development. So the government designates certain geographical areas because, like in the state of Gauteng, for pro laws, we also had, I don't remember the exact name now, but we had laws which separated people at colors and races, right? So HUBZones are basically where the government allocates certain tracts of land, and it says that these certain areas can get preferences or can get a preference in government contracts. In the States, that is 3% of all federal contracts should be awarded to these HUBZone areas. Now, HUBZone contracts can be awarded either through a sole source report, that means that the government approaches a specific area and it says we would like to prefer you in this procurement, or in a set aside where a specific area, specific areas are set aside for preferencing, or it can be awarded through an open competition. That means all people or all areas that are designated as HUBZones can compete for a specific contract. Now, what are the requirements? Of course, not just any area can be a HUBZone. So what would you need to comply with in order to be a HUBZone business? You need to be or have 51% ownership. Let me just get to the requirements specifically. 51% owned or controlled by US citizens, a community development corporation, an agricultural cooperative, an Alaskan Native corporation, a Native Hawaiian organization, or an Indian tribe. Secondly, size. So the business that wants to register as a HUBZone needs to be of a certain size, and that size is determined by the Small Business Administration Industry Classification System. The principal place of business needs to be within that HUBZone, of course, according to a qualified census tract or a qualified non-metropolitan county, a redesignated area, or qualified base closures area. So you can basically go onto Google and ask which areas are HUBZone areas, and a map will come up that will show you exactly which areas have been designated as HUBZones. So businesses that want to become a HUBZone need to have an employee percentage of 35% within a designated HUBZone. That business needs to show that it
attempts to maintain within a designated hub zone. That business also needs to show that it will comply with applicable limitations on subtracting requirements, and it needs to not be subject to any suspension or debarment requirements. In other words, it needs to not be debarred from contracting with the government. Now, what are some of the challenges in the HUBZone program? Now, obviously, we can understand that, corruption is an issue in general, especially in public procurement. So naturally, we are designating certain areas as HUBZones. We will also have corruption issues, along with some others. For example, there's a very long certification process. So all these requirements that HUBZone businesses need to submit in order to certify as a HUBZone business is a very long process, a long and arduous process. So this is what hinders a successful HUBZone program, because they cannot get certified in time to tender for a contract. There's obviously some fraud and abuse in the form of submitting fraudulent papers. You're actually a big company rather than complying with the small size requirements. Verification during recertification. So these HUBZone businesses need to recertify or reapply to become HUBZone businesses every 2 to 3 years. And there's no verification done that the documents submitted are actually about it. So that's naturally a problem. And then also communication with businesses. The government here in the States is unfortunately lacking in adequate communication with businesses, in communicating certain requirements, in updating them of applicable notices in the HUBZone program. Now that we know, before we go there, I wanted to show you, this is what a HUBZone area in the States looks like. So I went and pulled up the map and looked at the nearest HUBZone area. This is in Columbia Heights here in DC. So this is ordinarily what a HUBZone area would look like. So this area would be subject, or would be able to, or businesses in this area could apply to be certified as a HUBZone business. You'll see that there's a little bit of development there with the stores having popped up. So what is the situation in South Africa? So in the States we have this HUBZone program. In South Africa we have something similar. We have what's called the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. Alright, so what's interesting to some people is that our procurement process is actually couched in our Constitution. Section 217 of our Constitution actually says that when the government contracts, it needs to comply with certain requirements. And those are very broad ones, like fairness, equity, transparency, competition, cost effectiveness. And we have to figure out ourselves what those mean. But over time, and with practice, and with academics writing lots and lots of things about it, we now know what these things mean. So we have Section 217 of the Constitution, and the Constitution interestingly also says that agencies or government agencies are allowed to prefer certain persons or categories of persons. So that's where your affirmative action comes in. And certain legislation has been established in order to further that. And the legislation is the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. That's a mouthful. We just call it the PPPFA. And preference is awarded in South Africa based on a point system. So right at the bottom, you'll see a little, what looks like a timeline. That's just to explain to you how a tender process or a contracting process works for those that don't know. First, the government will determine what it needs, let's say 100 tables, and it will place an advertisement in the local newspaper, and everybody who's able to provide it will submit their bids or offers. All right, that's the first part of your tender process. The second one is then where the government evaluates each of those offers. And the third is where it awards those. And it's at this last stage, the award stage, where points out of 100 are awarded to each and every contractor in South Africa. Now, we call it the 80-20 or the 90-10 point system, where 80 points are awarded for price, or 90, and 20 for equity, 20 or 10. So price means they will compete on who is providing the best or lowest price more often than not. It's a little more complicated than that, but let's call it just who has the best price offer. In South Africa, we also have a second piece of legislation that applies, and that's the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, also a mouthful that we just call the BBEE. And this act has a specific scorecard that contractors need to comply with. Now let's see what they need to comply with. So contractors have to show that they have that they're employing Black or Africans in their business. So they have to show Black ownership. In the second instance, they have to show Black management control, employment equity, in other words, how many Black or African or white people they have appointed or hired, preferential procurement, which is what I just described, enterprise development, skills development, how they are developing the skills of their employees, and socio-economic development as well. So now we know on the one hand HUBZones in the States and this very complicated point system thing, scorecard in South Africa. Now how do these two come together? But first let's see what are the areas in South Africa that we're trying to improve. So we've seen the pictures of what HUBZones look like in the States. And now we'll have a look at what these townships in South Africa look like. Now my paper is premised on the idea that we should incorporate the HUBZone program into the preferential procurement system. Because the point system is incredibly rigid. Businesses can only perform in terms of those 7 elements of the scorecard, and that's it. There is no other discretion in how they can employ or how they can use. They cannot be innovative in any way in developing Black or African people. Remember, every time I say Black, I mean the group of Black people, Black, so-called colored, and Indian. Right? Now we'll look at 2 different townships because the culture is so different in South Africa, one in Johannesburg and one in Cape Town. Soweto is the biggest township in Johannesburg, and we'll look at that one first.
So Soweto is an abbreviation of Southwestern Townships. Soweto stands out to be one of the biggest townships that we have in the whole of South Africa. Our population is estimated to be anything between 2 to 3 million people who call Soweto home.
So when you come here, you're going to be a part of this community. We are in Orlando West, and we call it the heart of Soweto.
Using the tuk-tuks is also a way of giving people, a personal feel of the interactions with locals. We're able to jump in and out of the tuk-tuks, and be able to talk to people, have the, feel of how really Soweto is. High-fiving the kids is actually what we want people to experience when they come to Soweto. So that's why no car, no bus, rather bicycle or tuk-tuk. It makes it easier for any interaction.
Taste the food, you get to taste the drinks, you get to hear the different languages, South African languages, hear their own spoken.
This used to be an original house where Nelson Mandela first lived when he came to Soweto. So it's basically the roots of, history. Officially or originally, apartheid started in 1948 and ended in 1974. So when apartheid was introduced, that's where we had about 153 laws and acts which were made to oppress Black people.
So we ran amok in confusion, running for cover, dashing into other people's homes, and something was itching our eyes, and when told it's tear gas, then I looked at my brother, I saw blood coming from the side of the mouth. So as that man was about to put my brother in the car, he said, "Oh, he's dead."
So you come here also and meet people who are more inspired by unity, have a lot of stories to share, who've contributed in one way or the other, to make sure that we could enjoy this South Africa.
I think generally the media has been, selling Soweto in a very different way, which is not really the truth. But just generally to also understand the history of South Africa, how the oppression, really affected a lot of people, how it affected a lot of lives, and also just to see the general change and how people are really happy, even when they see you guys as visitors coming, puts a smile.
I would say tourism is very important, and to visiting communities like Soweto or townships in South Africa is very important in developing and, just showing people that the world is changing.
Alright, so in this video you'll see a big difference between the Hubzone in the States and townships in South Africa. And this is why geographical preferences in South Africa I think would be so important. Now, it's not just poverty that's in townships. It's become very robust in businesses, salons, and local foods, coffees, restaurants, hotels. Now, let's look how it's different in Cape Town. Sorry, just get back to that slide.
So I'm in Cape Town. Well, actually, I'm just outside of central Cape Town in a township called Khayelitsha. Now, townships have a little bit of a dark past, but these days they're often home to vibrant, creative, and friendly communities that are definitely worth checking out. So let's go. Townships are urban areas close to South Africa's major cities. Under apartheid, they were built to house non-whites that worked in the metropolises. Ever since, communities have been developing super fast, and while there are some rough edges, they're also home to some unique eateries and experiences that show a very different side of South Africa. Khayelitsha is Cape Town's biggest township, which makes it a great place to explore.
2 spinach smoothies and 1 muffin. The whole idea was, when it started, it was just focusing on bread. In the 4 years that it was running, they found a huge challenge where the fair was now dealing with a market that doesn't really understand the idea of being healthy. So to attract a variety of different people, they started introducing the smoothies, the muffins, and all.
They are proper green smoothie. Cheers. That's pretty good. It's actually quite sweet. So spinach, apple,
pear, banana, ginger.
Oh, it's like a fruit salad. Salty, green flavor, it's good. So the owner here is a vegetarian. That must be tough.
Very much. Tradition dictates that you have to eat meat.
And then he came and opened up a spinach
restaurant.
Yeah.
A museum is the place where we archive the past. And if you look at gangsterism and crime, it's something that's happening now. So the initiative is about taking that and putting it in the past by having a museum as a concept. The concept of looking at the influence that gangs play in developing a community, especially when it comes to teenagers.
Is this still a problem now?
Going to gangs, it's an initiation for them. And going to prison, it's like you learn your stripes.
Yeah.
Coming back out is more difficult because gangs have been playing a vital role in those communities. They've really been integrated into how people live. The number 18 is the legal age for anyone to get arrested. So they work with the youth so that they prevent them from actually getting to that position once they're 18. So an actual positive side is if a kid is more exposed to other options in life. They're not just confined in a space that's filled with all this negativity.
Keeping people occupied and busy.
So in that sense, you find they're able to think about what they want out of life, how they're going to get there, and who's going to assist them the best way to get this. Basically, this is a replica of an actual prison cell.
2 people will be in the cell?
No, literally it takes out more than 6 or 8 people.
So what's the history of this place?
The coffee shop's like 2 years old, but he's driving a different conversation. It's done a lot in terms of what youth in Khayelitsha specifically feel about coffee as a product, but coffee as a culture as well. He has his own signature blend, so you're not drinking Starbucks coffee.
Yeah, it's a mystery, but it's pretty fruity.
And the space is not just about enjoying a good cup of coffee. Most of us don't have proper office spaces, so young people
come here to
work. So it's about re-engineering spaces. We're literally sitting in the garage, but it doesn't feel like that.
Romantic dinner for two. This place is pretty cool. It's a bit more fancy than what I would imagine.
So this is Abigail, who's the founder of Fold. As a child of Fold, they lived in those smaller Fold houses.
Literally,
Lived
4 rooms.
When she was trying to discover her cooking talents, she entered MasterChef and became one of the top 7 finalists.
So she was just self-taught?
Self-taught, everything. Her and her husband, myself. For them it was, I really want to own a restaurant, but I want to have those old meals that she grew up eating. That twist and their version of cooking, it makes it more delicious. So this is called the Tonga Tamanzi, which is steamed bread.
Yeah, it feels like really dense.
We grew up eating that bread every day.
I know it's a bit fancier and whatnot, but it's got the classic burger flavor. Like you've got the tomato relish for the tomato sauce, beef with some mayonnaise and stuff, grilled onions. Yum. That bread is crazy though.
And this is called kumosho.
Oh, this almost tastes Asian to me. Like you got coconut and then the lamb curry. I'm a big fan of that. I'm stuffed, but thank you so much for showing me around today.
I enjoyed hosting you as well. In my language, as we were saying gratitude to someone, you say engosi, kakulu, and then
Engosi kakulu. So it's been a pretty cool day. I think it's easy to overlook visiting a place like this and think, oh, it's not really of interest to me, but when I think of a cool place to visit, I want a little bit of history, some kind of community aspect, some good food, and ideally a good cup of coffee. And I feel like KLH offered all of that. But before I go back to the city, I'm definitely going to get one more of those spinach smoothies.
Alright, so that showcases some of what townships look like in South Africa. On the one hand, we found it's very run down, not very well taken care of. On the other side, we have this bustling economic hub that's starting to come up. People are building businesses in their back doors, in their garages, and providing fresh food to local stores. So these are the types of businesses who can benefit from something like a Hubzone program. If a township in South Africa is designated as a Hubzone, and there is a specific designation like 3% in the States, I think it should be more in South Africa, just because of the sheer number of people living in informal settlements, which we saw is 12% of the country, a quarter of the country living on social grants, and most of those people on social grants are living in these informal settlements. So this is how this geographic preference can really build and improve the economic situation of people and children in townships. Now, my suggestion is that how could it work in South Africa legally? We saw that in the Hubzone program, there is a legal framework for that. In South Africa, we have the triple PFA, the triple BEE, all of these acronyms. Where exactly will this fit into the picture? Now, the recommendation is that it will form a completely separate form of preference in South Africa. Just because of the sheer need and numbers, it's justified in my view. However, if the legislature was not inclined to dedicate it as a specific form of preference, which they can because South Africa's procurement law is undergoing reform at the moment, so it's the perfect opportunity to include something like this. It could also form part of the triple BEE scorecard as an 8th element, or if not, it could fall under one of these elements of the scorecard, which is employment equity in the number of employees, where people living and working in townships can be included. In skills development from young people, that's why I showed the part on the gangsterism, because that is what happens when you live in a low resource area subject to poverty and crime, is that they get into gangs. There is nothing to keep them busy otherwise. So if the businesses in those Hubzones can indicate the skills development of getting teenagers before they get into those gangs, that is a way to develop the area as well. Then preferential procurement by giving contracts to these small enterprises such as the Spinach King or the coffee making lady, and also socioeconomic development. Now it seems that this idea was not as novel as I thought, because the Gauteng Township Development Act was actually enacted this year. And Section 3A says that the government or main contractors are to buy from large group or group of township-based enterprises, or they must compel their contractors to spend a certain percentage of the contract in township enterprises. Now this is a provincial-based piece of legislation, so it will apply only in Gauteng, probably in Soweto, where it's most needed, I guess. The problem is that because it's sort of a dry run or a test run, there is no legal framework for it. So this piece of legislation has been created, but it doesn't say how these people will be preferred. How will these contracts be awarded? And that's why I say right at the bottom, the new legislation does not adequately regulate the issue. In fact, it seems like this legislation just says that this is the idea we have and this is what we need to do. And my proposition is that we use public procurement in order to do this. So the legislation does not refer to procurement. In fact, it mentions procurement, but it doesn't say how procurement can be used to further the objectives of this legislation. And my suggestion of it forming either a separate form of preference or to form under the scorecard is something that can be used in terms of this legislation. And that would either need to be put in the regulations to the Act, or the Act would need to be amended, which is not that difficult to do. Alright, now in order to explain to you why this is even more important, is to illustrate to you the power of changing a law. I think sometimes us as lawyers and as educated people forget the power that we have, even just in writing a paper. Because the right person will read that paper and have the power to implement that. And I think that we need to raise our voices as people that are informed and educated to bring about the change. Now let me show you the power of changing a law and what it has had in these people's lives. On the left-hand side, this lady was born in the 1920s. She attended a small farm school, so no formal regulated education. I think she went up to 4th or 5th grade, basic English, basic Afrikaans, basic geography, basic maths. Later on, she couldn't even read and write. The lady on the right, in 1963, there was what's called the Colored Persons Education Act, which allowed mixed people, as we refer to now, to become teachers in South Africa. The limit, however, was that they could either become teachers or nurses. And that's why even in my family, all my mom's siblings are teachers, because it was the height of professionalism for mixed people in the 60s and 70s. Right? So this is how limited this was. If you look at the law, the Colored Persons Education Act and also the Population Registration Act, what makes this so ridiculous is that the term white is defined as a person who identifies, or a person who is apparently white. What does that mean? Black was defined as African or native, and colored was defined as neither native nor white. So there's this middle group of what I call mixed people that has been subjected to apartheid laws as well, because you're not as dark as people think you should be, and also not as light as they would like you to be. So there's this middle group of just people swaying and just, not really having a proper classification. It was so ridiculous that in prisons, the apartheid prisoners were also treated according to the color of their skin. So black prisoners would receive a slice of bread without butter in prison, and mixed prisoners would receive a slice of bread and porridge. So because they were a little lighter, they were treated better and fed better. That is how deep the division was in South Africa, and how important our constitution and trying to achieve equity is. So I told you earlier that in 1993 we had the interim constitution which abolished apartheid finally, and in 1997 the final constitution. And that meant that this little girl could then in 1994 go to a so-called white school. In 1997, well, she started at a so-called mixed or colored school, and in 1997 then went, oh, so this is grandmother, daughter, and granddaughter. And that's why I'm trying to illustrate the power of the change of a law through generations. Imagine what their lives could have been had this law not existed. Right? So with the abolishment of apartheid in 1994, it led that this little girl on the left could then graduate with a doctorate in 2018. And that's me with my dad. So this is my mother's mother, my mom who became a teacher, and myself who entered school in 1994. And that's why my education is so special to me. Because 1994 was the year that apartheid was abolished, the time that I started my primary schooling. 1997, with our final constitution, I was able to go to a so-called white school that enabled me to go to any university I wanted to and become a lawyer and stand in front of you today. Something that would be unimaginable to my grandparents. And it allowed me to take any of the roads on the picture that I wanted to. So I just want to implore everybody to think of, even if you're writing a paper or the work that you do, how impactful what you say can be. Because this is how it changed my life. Thank you. It was lovely talking to you today. This was taken 2 weeks ago when our president visited Washington, D.C. That's our President Cyril Ramaphosa with President Biden about 2 weeks ago. So thank you very much, everyone. And this is why I have the cover to the presentation, because my suggestion is what can improve these children's lives. Thank you. Questions and comments? Welcome.
I have questions. Yes, please. She's the Latin American accent. I love your idea. I'm sure that you can do it there in the country. I have 5 questions. Okay. First, you talk about preference in South Africa. You talk about preference in plastic. I wanted to know if you have any program exclusively for women. And then, number 2, how many companies, small businesses you have registered in your government program now, and is it easy to register? How many months you have to register there? Okay, 3. In general, in South Africa, United States, and Argentina, why do you think that this kind of program of preference are important? And what do you think about the principle of competition against this kind of program? And third, when I give finally one idea about your research, that maybe big companies should make team agreements with this small business, like mandatory for get the business. Yeah. That's a good suggestion. I think your questions are coming. So we have that already with big businesses and should actually subcontract with small businesses. It's just an implementation problem. Okay. So the thing in South Africa is that we have one rules, but the implementation is practical. Yes, the practical aspect. And I've spoken to many big contractors now asking, what is the problem? And some of them are just race issues. Because unfortunately, based on the numbers and statistics and the level of education, we're only 25 years old. So you can imagine the inequality that's still prevails in South Africa. We've made incredible starts, but not enough. So there is a requirement in our preferential laws that 30% of the contract needs to be subcontracted to small business. Whether it's done in practice, we don't want to do. In terms of our tobacco competition, we should last. In terms of women-owned businesses, this is a very big problem we have, and what I've also advocated genuine responsibility for the other happening and don't understand why not because they have a plan to do it. It's also a resistance of men to work with women. So Africa is traditionally very patriarchal, and some of those values and principles still exist. Last year I did research, our people did research actually on the extent to which women-owned businesses are involved in government contracting. In fact, they are used. There are also no statistics to say how many small businesses we have and how long it takes. So the system is a mess on the business. And that is why I'm advocating for electronic procurement. The electronic procurement would show how many women we have, how many small businesses we have, the rate that contracts are awarded to both small businesses and women-owned businesses. But it's almost as if the reticence to do that is referred of corruption. But it's just a glaring solution that is not implemented. So I don't know what is happening in our government system. And then with regard to your issue in competition, it's always changing between in competition. Always. And it depends on the thing that is being procured more often than not. But because of our numbers, the equity takes precedence. Just because we have 90% left, and 90%, I don't want to say 90%, it's not a lot of people that can poor and all of that, but the legacy is so dramatic that we can't run that economic time because we need equality will continue for the next 200 years. So many times procuring entities do ask themselves, what is being prioritized in this procurement? So in, for example, COVID-19 competition I mean, naturally, you have to, because just have to pay over opinion for that to be confirmed, right? So during COVID, for example, so the government is not unwilling to say, okay, well, competition is more important right now. COVID is an example. So, you know, where quality, the building of a hospital, for example, is more important. The idea is that certain principles will weigh with you. Right? Yes, thank you. There's something at the back of this. Thank you for coming in and talking with us. Yes, in our country, we are partner partners. And we use these census methods, but not that partner for the reasons that you expressed. There may be rights, not just census, but identify. Yeah, the HUBZone, and that action so that it's in the best interest of our country, so that we can improve business opportunities for people in identified rural areas. We measured, does the government of South Africa have something like that? It sounds like the first thing is that they really have. You just don't, you have a lot of presence in South Africa. Yes, we do have a lot of government presence. It's just that my issue with affirmative action. So I think affirmative action can be for faith. Black economic empowerment is something different in my mind. So affirmative action is where people got to 94 and they said, oh wow, we've got 90% black people, they are poor and uneducated, and how are we going to run a country with 10% of people in the world, right? So they said, okay, let's put people in positions so they're able to be CEOs of companies and, you know, without having laid the groundwork for that, you know, correcting the education system. In South Africa, we actually had the Fight for Education Act, which was purposely creating less than perfect schools for black and colored people, so that they're not as educated as white. My parents had to travel and stay with strangers because the law did not allow them to stay in hostels with kids. My grandparents had to take their children and put them in the house of strangers to attend the next day school, which only went to a certain level anyway, and was taught by students, taught by teachers who weren't as educated as no one else. So the entire system was designed to oppress anybody with not that. So there is a big government presence in South Africa, and of course, issue. And because things are so overpriced, statistics are a problem. or you have your ID or passport, whatever, they ask you to put in the box. You're allowed to not put in your country. So how accurate these statistics are questionable in my mind because we're not obliged to hold it. At school, yes, the teachers hold it, but that's also, questionable because teachers are like, oh, you look white, and I thought we had one. I actually remember at school when a little boy was lighter than me, but he identified as black, and he just said, so confused. And I don't know what she thinks, black or color, whatever. But you understand how arbitrary that is and how ridiculous it is. So again, so it's and he was black. Yeah, and it's me. These are serious issues, but for Africans, I think it's so good humor. So it's a laugh. We see we have a lot of nice jokes and a lot of people that know. So I think that's just how it goes. That's the question.
Yes, first of all, congratulations for your amazing lecture. Because I'm very worried because she raised the bar. We are in trouble now. We will not be able to reach this standard for the next visiting scholar making lectures, but anyway, I'm very happy to hear you. My question, in fact, was very similar. It's about racial classification because, as well as in South Africa and Brazil, we have affirmative action. It's a very controversial issue. But do you believe that the public opinion in South Africa will understand that maybe HUBZones are a better way to make racial justice than just affirmative action?
So there is an upcoming middle class. So middle class is a parity from right? That's why I'm not angry with my face and my steps. I'm not joking. But there's a big middle class band in South Africa that is educated and that will understand that this is what needs to be done. If we have access to more things than the other classes, South Africa is solving another class issue as well, in my view. So that would involve in the paper. I talk about involving local government municipalities to educate and to tell them this would be the purpose. Because a lot of the time in the government contracting space, when there's something like a preference for a specific group of people, they're like, oh no, but you're not treating us equally. So this understanding of what quality and equity is not widespread. And I think we will do education on that, on what is that equity is and what justice is. People think we just need to all be treated the same. That is not right. So we'll definitely need education on that. Jenny?
Yeah, so first of all, excellent presentation. And I can also see some similarities with the Philippines. We actually have a very similar socioeconomic background. And the fact that the Constitution reflects the colonial history, we also have that. And this relates to my question because in our Constitution, in our procurement law, there are preferences for Filipinos. Yeah. I understand the objective. But in the Philippines, the way that it has been implemented, it's not effective. So what happens is because there is so little capital with Filipinos, and so it's corrupted as you described. There's so little competitors in the market that it's only maybe like 5 to 6. All of the biddings, they're all just 5 to 6 people competing. And in the end, the prices and the quality of the products that gets to the market is not that good. Yeah. So if does South Africa, Philippines does not have it right now. The South Africa has a way from a regulatory policy perspective wherein you measure if the guidelines or policies or laws actually achieve the objective that you set out to do, and what do you do if it doesn't achieve?
So that's a great question, Nelly. We do have some, but it's mostly in the construction industry. That's why I enjoyed studying procurement in the construction industry because I think they're not only were they uniquely for procurement before 1994, but they're ahead of the game when it comes to other industries. So they've started empowering women to construction procurement. They've done electronic procurement as well. So it's in the design of your procurement program. So that would be your monitoring and evaluation, and also right before you submit your offer, there is a way that they handle the construction where you can submit your technical offer first. So that's to make sure that the goods and the infrastructure comply with quality requirements, and only those who pass that test can go over to financial evaluation of your bids. So that's one way of ensuring that the goods that you are procuring is actually what you receive. And then it's just a matter of there are contractors that are appointed, like a manager almost. There is a manager company, something officer that is there for that purpose. And what's really interesting is that either in Chile, or Peru, they have citizen witnesses to make sure that what is being procured is actually what's being done. So I thought that was really interesting. We don't have that. So yeah, that's something you could look at. I actually do. I really.
First, thanks so much for this awesome presentation. Progressing our interest in research area, HUBZones, and use of preferences. My question, and it's part of my curiosity too, here in the US we have an executive agency called Small Business Administration.
Yeah.
Mentioned it to me. So it's my curiosity, does South Africa have an agency similar to that? Okay, and what role do you see, if any, in helping with the enforcement of this, if the government works about this?
Yeah. So I put that in the paper, so I can make a paper available once But yes, there is an formula in South Africa that is really, really good work. And we're trying to have more collaborative departments as well. So we have the Department of Trade and Industry, the National Treasury, and the Small Business Agency. But sometimes they work in isolation on stuff that really should be collaborative work, and it's not. So there is an agency, but I think the way they go about it. That's why I say we have beautiful laws. So it's the implementation that is a problem. So say people hate it and they're constantly not saying we should overhaul the whole system together, even for a legal solution. And we interview everyone. Because we need to make sure that you have the right person in the right position, the right intention, and the right qualification. And that is the problem we have, because if you look at the root problem of implementation, that's the root. People with their own personal agendas and corruption and all of that, which can be addressed with e-procurement, but also have the right people in the right position. And I always say corruption is not a systemic problem, it's a human problem. So what we do is work on humans. It's not a popular opinion, but hey, say you want to fix it, you know? So you have to fix it.
Yeah, I don't know if South Africa, like federal states, so they have like some kind of autonomy in different states. So is there any kind of difference between states in South Africa and differences in matters of how they deal with these challenges that you talked about?
So that's a good question, Aisha. So we have the 9 provinces, but procurement is applicable to South Africa. So national government and provincial government have the same rules, and then local government has rules as well. But one of the problems that we have with our regulatory system, oh no, it's okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So then you're getting to this. Oh, okay. All right then. So the problem that we have is that yeah, so the laws are applicable at national and provincial level and at local level. So we have so many different laws. We have too much of a constitution that's like an overarching rule, right? And then there are many, many pieces of legislation that are applicable at both national and provincial government level. And then each agency can also have its own policy. So I feel so sorry for these contracting guys who on the ground have to look at these 20-something pieces of legislation plus their own supply chain management policy and procure something and still have it look like what it was advertised at the beginning. So that's why we're trying to reform the laws, because much of our procurement issues have arisen from fragmented regulatory regimes that we have. So yeah, so it's not like emerging the state where each state has its own power. It's really applicable to everybody, and then people at local government level have their own set. but then a lot of the stuff that applies at national level is difficult, just because of the constitution that applies.
Yeah, sure. So you said that now we switched, or you would like to switch from affirmative action to enhanced affirmative action to what you call like black empowerment. And don't you think that this is gonna, it's probably no, but don't you think that we should switch to a system that should stop to refer to color criteria? Because you said several times that color criteria are lead to some situations where you don't know which box to tick and which box do you belong actually. So don't you think that we should, even in vocabulary, in terminologies, we should switch to something that is more colorblind, because we actually know that the fundamental problem is economic class.
Yeah.
Economic.
Well, definitely, that's a good question, and we ask ourselves that question all the time. But because I don't think it's possible in South Africa that economically, because of the amount of poverty that we have, and because the idea is that we were discriminated against because of our color. So how do you rectify that based on something else? You understand what I'm saying? So, and like I showed, the idea of PE is to bring people up to an equal level. It's not intended to rule the country forever. It's only until people are equal. But the path to getting there is paved with many stones, and it's very, very difficult to get there because we're also just learning. I mean, South Africa's 1994 is not that long ago. If you think about it. So the idea is.
Oh, after you're done.
Okay. So the problem is, I agree with you that eventually we should do away with color distinction, absolutely. But because of the inequality, the grade inequality, I don't think it's realistic and stick that. It would be a measure of judging each procurement on a case-by-case basis, like I mentioned, that it's a matter of is equally more important here now, or is it competition, or which element of procurement is it that needs to be further in this specific procurement. But I think in general, 90% black people in South Africa, just look at that number and what townships look like. It shouldn't be done really
I'm just wondering a little bit about, as they were working toward abolishing apartheid, you spoke of the social, economic things and how it evolved. I see how things happened when the Emancipation Proclamation finally came about. But for a long time, there was no change really in relationships between not even just black people, but including Latinos even, and all the various ethnic groups or international groups. But how did it kind of happen with you all socially? I know that's kind of not a legal question, and I'm sorry I'm not a lawyer, but I guess since we have you here, I kind of was wondering how the socialization kind of evolved, and maybe a little economic.
So that's a good question, Selena. It's obviously still an issue right now, which is why we have problems with implementation, because the subcontracting principle I was talking about, the rules are there, but it's not being implemented because of the race issue. So a part of South Africa, I want to say independent South Africa, has come a long way, but it's independent for our races. So it's really, that's why Nelson Mandela was such an important figure to us, because he was like a kumbaya person, came out of jail and he like used to take your hand. It could have been so different, and that's why a lot of white people immigrate. They're just like, oh hell no, Mandela's coming out, I'm leaving. That was a lot of white people's approach in 1994, which is why there's a lot of people that immigrated to Australia, New Zealand, whatever. But once, since he's died, the social fabric in South Africa has been changed because he was sort of seen as the father of reconciliation, and people were sort of, because African people are very all about their elders and respecting their elders, and the government didn't do things to rock the boat. But now that he's dead, it's sort of like, oh no, he's not meant to do whatever he wants. So sometimes it feels like there's a little bit of a switch. But it was really a personal thing in the day, because you know how you see your parents as invincible and they know everything and they're gonna be there forever. And when my parents never spoke about it, unless I asked. So they made a conscious decision that we're not going to transfer our fullest life. And that was a personal decision made. Other people talk about it all the time. They're just like, oh no, they're not opening the door because you're black. Oh no, you can't even. Not everything is that much about color. You know, some people there's a lot of bitterness for, especially in most of the country. So I mean, at my university in Lisa, it's mostly black and white. You know, so there's a really ingrained bitterness and anger and toxicity and resentment in some areas. In other areas, people are a lot more enlightened. I find Cape Town is a lot more. Some people at work always end up going there. So it's a personal choice. It was hard though. It was really hard. I started my school when I went to the so-called white school. I could see difference in my education and a difference in how the teachers were. And even now, I mean, as an adult, I obviously deal with it very differently. After I left high school, I was an avid piano player in high school, and my mother once asked, you know, how come you don't play in these concerts? You know, after like 4 years of being in high school. And I had a reason every time because that's what the teacher told me. But my mom was just like, why is it good? Like, I would pass my exam so well, but Allison is the only one not at the concert. And Allison also happens to be the only non-white student in the music class. You know, so as a child, I didn't see those things, of course. But I mean, that was in the early, that was like 2001, 2002. That's not long ago. So I mean, that it was a social choice of the teacher to exclude me, despite how well I may have played or whatever. So that's what I'm trying to say. The laws change, but not the implementation.
Thank you. Congratulations. Really well. First of all, I wanted to say that you were talking about businesses and
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure where you would have to maybe.
It must have been.
Yeah. I have a question. And in your education, do you have any chapter or any specific provisions for the relation between the time investment in the network and the system? And I know that the issue here is because from the general that has been in the that what about for example people with disabilities or elders or their consumers into this program?
Yeah. So the Act specifically refers to people of color, women, and people with disabilities, and veterans as well. Yeah. So that's the specific wording of the Act that refers to all government contracts. So yeah, there is that. Economic policy, it's a policy issue. It's not within the Constitution or legislation specifically. There is legislation, but it's very broadly worded. So economic policy is really within the realm of our national finance. And that's why every year we have a budget speech, and everybody holds their breath for how much the interest is going to be increased and what the new financial policy is.
So I don't know if this conversation has been had, but has there been a discussion about what the metric is that these policies will no longer agree with? How are
I
you
don't
going
think
to
there has been, quite honestly. It's a very good question, but I don't think there has been. Just because our reporting and management statistics is so terrible, I don't think there has been at all. But I don't think we're even thinking about it to be frank, because it's just such a desperate state. But at the same time, I think the US system can technically respond to the South African system in the scorecard, for example, because implementation in the household program is also a process. So that's probably a race problem too. So if we had in the US a scorecard, for example, or a form of it, that would force businesses to have to look at how many black people they're employing in their businesses, how are they managing the skills of their people, where do their people live, how are they upskilling them. So that's something that could be important, both ways. Because at the moment it's just a law that says, oh, this is for businesses that are designating certain tracts of land, and implementation-wise, you can think about the amount of money that you have in the state specifically. So that number could be increased to, I think, 10%. And I mean, if you had the policies that we have in South Africa, could be used over 50 years. Because your culture is the other way around. More white people than black people. So I think if you had, certain areas are obviously more black than others, but statistically, America is more white than black. And there were similar policies implemented there. I think you could have a country that would be equal much faster than that. So they actually cross over there in the we try to surface. It's a good moment. Yeah, to end. We can continue here for hours. Thank you so much.
I wanted to thank you for your amazing presentation. As you see, we would have been discussing this with you for hours, but I particularly appreciated your comment about the power of the law, but the huge void that we have in implementation. That's what we're all working for.
Yes. Thank you.